Human rights Palestinians decry ICC prosecutor's delay of Israeli war crimes investigation. LGBTQ rights LGBTQ activists took on ICE, the corporatization of pride, and more in 2019 human rights in wake of Hanukkah attack. Sanders calls for stand against anti-Semitism environment. We learned about money in politics in 2019 prisons. His comments prompted President Donald Trump to respond on Twitter. He made the same prediction in 2016. Nobody ever said Michael was stupid. But Moore's comments went further than Trump's tweet alluded to. He said the working class in the United States is mostly women, people of color and young people, all groups who tend to vote Democratic. Moore, who supports Bernie Sanders, said Democrats can win if they focus on these voters and on bold proposals like Medicare for all. Transcript Amy Goodman. Today we spend our second hour with acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore. Last Thursday, during an interview with Michael on Democracy Now!, he predicted Donald Trump would win re-election if Democrats fail to choose a candidate who excites their base of voters. Michael Moore, I think if the election were held today, Hillary won by 3 million popular votes. I believe whoever the Democrat is next year is going to win by 4 to 5 million popular votes. There's no question in my mind that people who stayed home, who sat on the bench, they're going to pour out, in California, New York and, but also in Texas and whatever, places that Trump will probably win, but yeah, there's going to be a much higher percentage of people voting against him. The problem is that he will, if the vote were today, I believe, he would win the electoral states that he would need, because, living out there, I will tell you, his level of support has not gone down 1 inch. In fact, I'd say it's even more rabid than it was before, because they're afraid now. They're afraid he could lose, because they watched his behavior. So they are voracious in their appetite for Donald Trump. That's the bad news. Amy Goodman. So, that was Michael Moore on Democracy Now! On Thursday. President Trump then tweeted his response to the show, saying, quote, he made same prediction in 2016. Nobody ever said Michael was stupid. But Michael Moore said more. This was the rest of his comment. Michael Moore, the good news is, again, number one, never forget there's more of us than there are of them. The majority of the American people agree with us. 70% of the voters next year are women, people of color and young adults. Okay, all that on our side. So, what we have to do is we have to make sure we don't give them another Hillary Clinton to vote for. Amy Goodman. So, that was Michael Moore speaking on Democracy Now! On Thursday and getting that response from President Trump. Stay in the loop, never miss the news and analysis you care about. Today, we play part 2 of our interview with Michael Moore, the Oscar-winning filmmaker. His most recent documentary, Fahrenheit 11/9. His other films include Michael Moore in Trumpland, Fahrenheit 9/11, Bowling for Columbine, Sicko, Capitalism, A Love Story, Where to Invade Next and Roger. He's just launched a new project, a podcast called Rumble with Michael Moore. Well, Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I spoke to Michael in our studio last week about a number of key issues in the 2020 presidential campaign: gun control, climate and race. I started by asking about the Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles earlier this month, when PBS moderator Amna Nawaz asked businessman Andrew Yang about being the only candidate of color on the debate stage, then asked Bernie Sanders the same question. Amna Nawaz: thank you, Mr. Yang. Senator Sanders: I do want to put the same question to you, Senator Sanders. What message do you think, Sen? Bernie Sanders: I will answer that question, but I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change for a moment, because I do believe this is the existential issue. Amna Nawaz: Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked? Sen. Bernie Sanders, I certainly can, because people of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change. And by the way, we have an obligation up here, if there are not any of our African American brothers and sisters up here, to speak about an economy in which African Americans are exploited, where black women die 3 times at a higher rate than white women, where we have a criminal justice system which is racist and broken, disproportionately made up of African Americans and Latinos and Native Americans who are in jail. So we need an economy that focuses on the needs of oppressed, exploited people, and that is the African American community. Amy Goodman. So, that's Bernie Sanders responding to the PBS moderator, the first Muslim American moderator of a debate, Amna Nawaz, in the Los Angeles Democratic presidential debate, that had one person of color left, although there are a few more that are in the presidential primaries, Cory Booker and Julian Castro. Michael Moore? Michael Moore, well, first of all, I know Bernie. So, he didn't get to finish his climate change thing from before, and he is like a dog with a bone with an issue, so he wanted to finish his climate change, and he wasn't listening to what was the new question. But that's Bernie. He's like, this is the thing that's going to kill all of us, and I have to finish my last sentence, what I was going to say about that. So yeah, I understand that. But I thought this is it's a teachable moment that Amy Goodman, but, of course, she was also pointing to a vulnerability on his part, which is how much support he has in the African American community. Michael Moore, well, he has the poll last week shows that Bernie Sanders is now polling at number 1. He has more voters in favor of him, non-white voters, than any of the other candidates. He's number 1 in the polls with Black, Hispanic and Native American and Asian voters. That's just the truth. The majority of people of color, in the polls so far, want Bernie Sanders. He's been number 1 with the Hispanic vote since the beginning. I don't think he's ever not been. There's not been a poll this year where he hasn't been number 1. So, you know, it stung a little to watch that. I mean, it was, but because I know him, doesn't anybody have a grandparent? I mean, seriously. Once they've got to finish their thought, and he didn't get to finish his thought, and he was going to finish his thought. But that's who you want. You want that person in that debate with Trump, even though I don't think Trump will do a debate. I think he'll refuse to debate. That's my good feeling. Amy Goodman, for all the candidates, or if it was Bernie Sanders. Michael Moore, no, Amy. I don't. I think he will try to. Amy Goodman, you don't think he would debate Joe Biden? Michael Moore, no, I think he'll try. No, he'll try to avoid the debates. He does not want certain. See, he doesn't control the microphone at the debate like at the rally. So, and because, you see, we still are thinking, oh, it's normal, so there's going to be a debate. Elizabeth Warren, she's going to kill him in the debate. And I say to people, you know there's not going to be a debate. You're the same people who were thinking we were going to get the tax returns. He was never going to give the tax returns. He has still not given the tax returns. And his court is not going to make him give the tax returns. So, stop thinking like it's normal. Even we still do that. Things will not be that way. And, you know, I think we need a fighter like that, and we need somebody who will not be diverted. He was not done with his sentence on climate change. And that's what he was focused on. Nurmeen Sheikh, well, can I just ask you, though, Michael? I mean, a lot of people are now suspicious of polls, for obvious reasons. Michael Moore should be, yeah? Nurmeen Sheikh, following 2016. What about the fact? So, first of all, we don't know how reliable those polls will be, especially a year from now. Michael Moore, correct. Nurmeen Sheikh, almost a year from now. And also, the fact that a lot of centrist Democrats think that Sanders is far too left-wing and that a democratic socialist could never be the president of the United States? Michael Moore, what those centrist Democrats are really saying is they think the American public is far too left-wing, because if, again, it's not just one poll, it's every poll, shows that the majority of Americans believe women should have control over their reproductive system, not men, not the government, nobody. Amy Goodman, including Catholic women. You're Catholic. Michael Moore, including Catholics, that's correct. Nermeen Sheikh, but all Democrats would say that, every Democratic presidential candidate. Michael Moore, well, yes. And they would all say that we need a raise in the minimum wage, that mass incarceration is an issue, etc., etc. But just do a gut check. Who do you believe will actually not relent, not compromise? Right away, we were so happy to get Barack Obama elected. He appoints Larry Summers and Timothy Geithner to run our economy. Larry Summers from Goldman Sachs, Geithner was the head of the New York Fed, they're part of the problem. He appoints these two guys to run our treasury and our economy. That was like such a, I couldn't believe it. And it was like then, he had, for 2 years, we had the majority of the House and the Senate, and we could have gotten a lot done. But he wanted to go slow. He wanted to compromise with the Republicans. He wanted to kumbaya this thing. And look what happened. He got one thing through, Obamacare, a half measure, not what we really need, not true healthcare, true universal healthcare. 50 million had been uninsured before Obamacare. They brag about how now there's 20 million more that have health insurance. Well, there's 30 more million that don't, still, with Obamacare. So, look, I love Barack Obama, but as I showed in my last film, he came to Flint, and he drank the water. President Barack Obama, you know, generally, I have not been doing stunts here, but, you know. And this used a filter. The water around this table was Flint water that was filtered. Amy Goodman, that's Barack Obama. Michael Moore, that's Barack. Amy Goodman, taking that glass of water, Michael Moore, yes, and telling Amy Goodman, and drinking it. Michael Moore, and telling people it's okay to drink the poison water. And it was a knife through the heart of especially of the African American community in Flint. Nobody could believe it. Now, we're not going to criticize him publicly. We're not going to, certainly not going to go vote for Trump. Amy Goodman, deeply thankful he came to Flint. Michael Moore, yes, and hopeful that he was going to have the Army Corps of Engineers come in and dig up the pipes and get rid of the awful situation. Instead, and this is May of 16. Amy Goodman, of course, we're talking about your city. Michael Moore, yes. Amy Goodman, Michael Moore, Flint, Michigan. Michael Moore, yes. And people left that gymnasium that day, and I knew what was going to happen, and is what happened. In Flint, later, a few months later, the election, 8,000, roughly, African Americans who had voted twice for Obama in 08 and 12 stayed home. 8,000. She lost the state, the whole state, by 10,000. Amy Goodman, Hillary. Michael Moore, Hillary. Amy Goodman, they even had one of their last debates there, didn't they, in Flint, Michigan? Michael Moore, well, that's the other thing that doesn't get discussed, like, how could she lose Michigan? Why did African Americans refuse to support her? Because all we've heard, for how many decades, oh, black people love the Clintons. You know, remember that old, awful thing, he playing the sax on Arsenio and then people saying he was our first black president? Remember that? That was like so, it just always sounded so offensive. And the truth is that the debate in Flint between Hillary and Bernie, someone at CNN gave Hillary the questions in advance, so she would know what the questions are. So, here you have these, Amy Goodman, Donna Brazile, right? Michael Moore, Donna Brazile. Here you have these, there was a group of mothers at the microphone, in Whiting Auditorium in Flint, who asked Hillary and Bernie about the water situation. And not knowing that Hillary already knew they were going to ask this question or two, Bernie didn't know, Hillary knew. A month later, when it was revealed that Hillary had their questions before they asked them, the women at that microphone went on TV. They said they felt like they were used like props by the Democrats, by the Hillary campaign. And it was so offensive, again, to the community, to the larger community, but also especially to the black community in Flint, that it's just more of the same. Well, of course they take us for granted. We're going to vote for the Democrat. Now we're used as props in a nationwide debate, where it was rigged, where one of the candidates knew the questions, to a town and to a group of people who have been so abused and suffered for decades now, and now have been put through a poisoning, where all children under the age of 6, because if you drink lead at that age, you have permanent, lifetime brain damage. There's no medicine, there's no cure, there's nothing that could be done to help them. All of these women and these parents' children have been poisoned. And to be treated that way by the Hillary campaign, I know some people watching this will go, yes, but you had to vote. You had to vote. You had to stop Trump. There comes a time when the boot has been on your neck for so long, you can't breathe. And you have decided, I'm tapping out. I'm out. I'm not voting for any of these people anymore. And that's what happened, and not just in Flint, but in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, in Philly, in Pennsylvania. Amy Goodman, that's acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore, in the latest U.S. election news. Politico is reporting Democratic Party officials and insiders, including Hillary Clinton allies, now say it's possible Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders might win the party's presidential nomination. Party insiders had largely written off Sanders' campaign, but in recent weeks some have reconsidered his chances, as Sanders continues to rise in the polls while candidates like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren have dropped in national and state surveys. Democratic California State Senator Scott Wiener told Politico Sanders has been, quote, more resilient than I anticipated. He has a very loyal following, and people have really stuck with him, unquote. We'll have more with Michael Moore in a minute. Break. Amy Goodman, Looking for America, by Lana Del Rey. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman, as we continue our conversation with acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore about the Democratic debates, the 2020 elections and more. Michael Moore explained to Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I what he means when he refers to the working-class voters in Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, key states Trump won in the 2016 election. Michael Moore, the real reason the whole press has got this wrong about the reason we lost these 3 states that gave Trump the victory was because we lost Lunch Bucket Joe, you know, the old, angry white guy, you know, working class. It starts right there. It's the lies by calling that the working class. And we're supposed to imagine, yeah, I watched the Monday Night Football last night, that's what working class is. That's a lie. The majority of the working class in this country are women. The majority are of color, and they are young. The young, 18 to 35, are paid the least amount of money of any age group. Women are still paid much less than men. And, of course, if you're of color, you already know this. You've been on the bottom of the economic ladder forever. So, none of this should be a surprise. But when you hear working class, from now on, I beg people, the image I want in your head is not, the angry factory guy coming out of work. I want you to think that it's a 35-year-old black woman. That is the average working class person in this country. It is a person of color. It is a woman, and that person is young. And that is the base. That is the way to win the election. But they aren't going to go for it anymore, if you're just the same old. How could Trump get 53% of the white female vote? I mean, that's only because enough of poor, other white voters, women, just said, this isn't for me. This doesn't affect my life. The largest party in America is the non-voter party. It's over 100 million strong. And all we need are a few million of them to have a sense that, what? This candidate is going to fight for me. This candidate is not going to sell out. Look at all that. Look at all the Democrats on that stage. And let me tell you, I can say something good about every one of them. But tell me the one, point out the one who will never sell out, who will never cave in, who will fight all the way. I think that's Bernie. Nermeen Sheikh. Well, let's go back to the Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles last week. One of the most heated exchanges of the evening came when Senator Elizabeth Warren criticized Mayor Pete Buttigieg for holding a closed-door fundraiser in what she called it Wine Cave, Sen. Elizabeth Warren, the mayor, just recently had a fundraiser that was held in a wine cave full of crystals and served $900 a bottle wine. Think about who comes to that. Mayor Pete Buttigieg. According to Forbes magazine, I am literally the only person on this stage who's not a millionaire or a billionaire. So, if this is important, this is the problem when issuing purity tests you cannot yourself pass. And Elizabeth Warren, I do not sell access to my time. I don't do call time. Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Hold on a sec. Elizabeth Warren, with millionaires and billionaires. Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Sorry, as of when? Senator. Sen. Elizabeth Warren, I don't meet behind closed doors with big dollar donors. And look, I've taken one that ought to be an easy step for everyone here. I've said to anyone who wants to donate to me, if you want to donate to me, that's fine. But don't come around later expecting to be named ambassador. Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Senator, your presidential campaign, right now, as we speak, is funded in part by money you transferred, having raised it at those exact same big-ticket fundraisers you now denounce. Did it corrupt you, Senator? Of course not. Nermeen Sheikh. So, that's from last week's Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles. Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Elizabeth Warren. Your response? The wine cave. Michael Moore, I was just saying while we were listening to that the Oxford Dictionary, you know, they pick the word of the year, and they probably already have done it for 2019, but I really think wine cave should be the word of the year. It's probably 2 words, but I would, you know, just mash it into one. Well, good for her for calling him out on it. You know, I'm very disappointed in the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and the things that I've heard him say and how he's now trying to be the centrist candidate. But we could do another show on just him and South Bend. South Bend's city limits almost abut by like a half a mile from the borderline of the state of Michigan. So we all know South Bend. It's also the home of Notre Dame, one of the most conservative colleges in America. But he was also right to point out some of the things about her, that she has come late to some things. As I said, she voted for Republicans. And I know why she's saying this. She says this every time, that 2 of her 3 brothers are Republicans. I believe 1 or 2 of her kids, you know, has voted Republican. If you're trying to convince Republicans to vote for you and you're Elizabeth Warren, you're way to the left, too far to the left for Republicans. They're not going to vote for you. Focus on the base. Focus on the non-voters, the have-nots of our society. They can vote, and they will vote for you. And I'll tell you what we did in Michigan between the 2016 election and the off-year election last year, in 2018. We threw Republicans out. But we came at it, my friends and I and others decided, after we lost, because it's usually embarrassing that Michigan would go red. I mean, I can't even tell you the level of humiliation that caused. Amy Goodman, there's something funny, calling Michigan red. Michael Moore, yes, right, yes. Not right. It's just not right, alright. The home of the labor movement and everything that Michigan has given the world. Amy Goodman, Michael, is this the new red baiting? Michael Moore, well, it's funny, because they take it from Tim Russert in the 2000, that night, where he had the liberal Al Gore states in red, I'm sorry, in blue, and the Republicans in red. So, for anybody our age or older, it's very funny to think that the Republicans are reds. But I think that was good. They should mix it up a little bit. People shouldn't be afraid of having the debate. Democrats get nervous, say, oh, no, don't attack each other. It's not an attack, it's a legitimate discussion about where's your money coming from. And I think that we should know that. They should talk about it. And people shouldn't be afraid. Look, I think everybody, probably not, I mean, there's probably people watching this show that are going to vote Green Party no matter what. There are people watching this show that are anarchists and have just given up on the whole thing and aren't going to vote for anybody. But I think that most of the people I know are going to vote for whoever has the D by their name next year. You know, for these remaining candidates, like you said, they all pretty much kind of support the same thing. You know, George Wallace is not on the stage. So I think that people shouldn't be nervous. People are going to vote for the Democrat. More people voted. What I was saying about last November, in the off year, we decided that, stop relying on candidates to get the vote out, politicians. It doesn't work a lot, especially with Democrats. Let's get ballot proposals on. So we got 2 ballot proposals on the ballot last November, one to legalize marijuana, and I mean really legalize it, and, number 2, to make voter suppression and gerrymandering a crime and put it in the Constitution. Both passed by around 60%. Amy Goodman, in Michigan. Michael Moore, in Michigan, in the state that voted for Trump, both passed. Now, what did that do, putting those on? The marijuana ballot proposal, we had almost double the turnout of the youth vote from the last off-year election, in 2014, because of that ballot proposal. And African Americans who had stayed away from Hillary, stayed away from the ballot box or left the top box blank, they came out and voted to make gerrymandering and voter suppression a crime. I mean, if you have the chance to actually make a law, make it part of the Constitution, you're going to show up. That's what happened. And because such a large number of African Americans and young people showed up to vote, we had a Republican governor, we had a Republican lieutenant governor, we had a Republican Secretary of State, and we had a Republican Attorney General, and they were all booted. No Republicans allowed in any, and who were they replaced with? A woman governor, a black lieutenant governor, a lesbian Attorney General, and a single mom to be Secretary of State. No white guys at all in the top government of Lansing, Michigan. And we threw out 2 Republican members of Congress in suburban Detroit, the ones up there who represent Lunch Bucket Joe. We threw them out and replaced them with Democratic women. And I saw how if we do these things, like ballot proposals, whatever, we can really affect change and have a good outcome next November. Amy Goodman, Michael, I want to ask you about primary caucus order and ask if you think this is important. Last month I had the chance to co-moderate a presidential forum on environmental justice at South Carolina State in Orangeburg with Mustafa Santiago Ali, who is the vice president of the National Wildlife Federation. We were talking about the 2 first caucus primary states, Iowa and New Hampshire, and why they're determining so much of the outcome. I asked the question to Senator Elizabeth Warren. Amy Goodman, speaking about racial injustice, do you think the order of the primary states should change? You have Iowa and New Hampshire, 2 of the whitest states in the country, and then we moved to South Carolina with a very significant population of people of color, and it means the candidates spend so much of their time catering to those first 2 states. Overall, do you think that should change? Sen. Elizabeth Warren, look, I'm just a player in the game on this one. Amy Goodman, I'm just a player in the game. Senator Warren said. Now, again, you have these 2 states, Iowa and New Hampshire. It's not as if tomorrow is Iowa, the next day is New Hampshire and the next day South Carolina, so you have a little more, so you have 24 hours to run in those states. It's now expanded, the pre-primary season, to like 2 years. We then interviewed the head of the Democratic Party of Texas, who said that he's been trying to get these candidates to a forum in Texas, one of the largest states in the country, and they all say,